Daniele Bolelli, thank you very much for joining me on the Anthology of Heroes podcast. How are you today?
Good. I better. I tried to poison myself with beet juice yesterday. I did a little too much, and I spent the day going. Ugh! And I watched a
Okay.
marathon of The Walking Dead because I couldn't do anything else. So that was my day yesterday. Today I feel better.
Okay, that's good. I can see maybe you spilt a bit on your t-shirt there, a bit of
Right,
the beet
right.
juice there.
Crazy,
I
weird
like
time
it a
my
lot.
looking thing. Yeah.
Very cool. For anyone that doesn't know, Daniele Bolelli is more or less podcasting history royalty in a way, right? Been around for a long time, I suppose. When did you start podcasting, actually?
I started podcasting a different podcast. I was doing the Drunken Taoist. I started in 2012, and then I started History on Fire. I'm pretty sure it was September 2015.
Right. Okay. So more or less, well, 10 years or so.
Yeah. It was actually funny. My intro to podcast, I didn't know what podcasting was in 2011, and my first podcast as a guest was Joe Rogan podcast, where I had no
Wow.
idea what he was, and he was like, now he's pretty much the biggest podcast in the world, and so it's a very deep dive right away.
Yeah, you really got stuck into that one quick. He must have been upcoming then as well, or had he been doing it a bit longer at that point?
I mean, he had been doing for a while, but I think he was episode 100 something, which now is, I don't even know where he's at, but like he's done it so much longer. But yeah, it was late 2011, so I think he had been doing it for, I don't know, maybe a year or two, something like that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, certainly both new to it at that point then, right?
Yeah.
So on our show, I'm sure you probably haven't got a chance to listen to any of our episodes or anything like that. But what we try and do is, what I've tried to do is kind of take a national hero from every country of the world. We started going through the list, just going A to Z. So, Albania, Algeria, that kind of thing. But then I started kind of thinking, well, I can jump around a bit more.
Yeah,
There's a few that I'm a bit more passionate about.
sure.
And on your show, obviously you've covered a lot of people. And you probably understand that hero to be quite a cliche term. I'm sure you would agree. Is there anyone that you think, even if you haven't covered them, anyone that stands out to you as either a personal hero or a hero from a nationalistic sense?
Sure. One of my all-time historical heroes that I have done a couple of episodes on was E.Q. Sojun, Zen, wild guy from the 1400s Japan. He's just too fun.
I love that episode of yours, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because so much of the stories we cover are war and conflict. And you got me wrong, of course there's something heroic in many of those guys, but it gets kind of tedious where everything is just about fighting. And to have somebody who's a fantastic historical figure and is not just because he killed people more effectively or is tough in war is like, it's a nice change.
Mm. Yeah, no, I like that episode, actually. I thought it was, as you said, quite unique in the sense that, I mean, I can't think of anyone like that kind of guy, right? The really telling that, was it the Zen masters, kind of what he thought of them and what he thought of their
Oh yeah,
traditions and all that.
he
I
was
particularly
hilarious.
enjoyed that, actually.
He was hilarious.
I think I mentioned to you in my email, but my favorite episode of yours was the one on Caravaggio.
Oh yeah.
And because I was reading, I always, as you probably do, you have a bit of a read of the descriptions before you start listening. I thought, I'm not going to listen to this one. It's just about some painter or something. And then I put it on, and man, that guy lived a life,
Yeah, it was funny. Once I was talking with Don Carlin about it, and I told him about the Caravaggio episode, and he was like, "Really, Italian painter? I mean, cool art, but what's the deal?" And I was like, "No. Think of it this way. Think Tupac being an Italian painter in the 1600s," and that was like, "Okay, say no more. I got it." That makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. I remember one particular scene you had him like running away from either the Knights Templar or the Knights
Yeah.
Hospitaller on a beach or something. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's crazy.
Oh, it's a crazy life for sure. I'm
Yeah,
actually planning. That's something I'm super excited about. I'm desperately trying to go forward with History on Fire, meaning by myself sometime by getting a few episodes done faster. Because I want to go back. Back in December, I had a chance to spend a month writing the beginning of a historical fiction about Caravaggio. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
kind of what I want to do. I got a good start, but I haven't touched it since January, so I'd like to get back to it. And
Sure.
that's something I'm very excited about.
Yeah, that would be you've written a few books already now, 5 or 6 now, right?
Yeah, I wrote books, but they were all non-fiction. So I don't really feel like writing nonfiction anymore. I really want to write stories. I want to write fiction. And the
Fantastic.
beginning of Caravaggio had such a blast. So I was like, oh, this is something I feel really good about.
You must spend a lot of time. I mean, and I try and get out an episode every 2 weeks or so, but your episodes are generally a lot longer than mine and also a lot more in depth. How long does it take you to do the read? I mean, how many, if you had to average out the books you read for
A lot,
episodes, I mean,
a lot. I
yeah.
mean, I'm trying to find, 6 years in, I'm desperately trying to find ways to cut down on the research time. It's hard because you need to really know your topics from A to Z. And sometimes the ones you know the best, you end up researching even more because you know them so well, but you want to know even more. So it's like, it's tricky because it ends up being easily 100 to 200 hours per episode, depending on how bad it gets. And it can get, recently I managed to get a couple of episodes done with maybe 100 total, so it's more like 50 per episode. I was super excited. I was like, this is awesome. I managed to get it. So I don't know. Maybe there are ways around it. There is a point where you become, it's diminishing returns when, you keep reading more and more books and what you get is a little bit more, but not nearly as much worth the time investment. But sometimes you run into things that, you had read 5 books and you're like, I'm done. I know everything there is. And then you read another one and you're like, oh, there's a whole other twist to this story. So that's tricky because sometimes you don't feel like you're ever ready to be done with the research.
Yeah, no, I completely know what you mean. I think sometimes, especially there's almost, I don't know about you, there's, if you're looking up books that are particularly old or maybe out of print, and you're going through the page 25 of Google search and you pull out one, you're like, yes, I've got the link to it finally and stuff like that. For the episode we did on Armenia, we did it about St. Gregory the Illuminator, who was the guy that kind of made the blueprint for the Christian church in a way. And I was going through this hymn book that was from the 5th century that had been translated through, God knows how many languages. Right. And all of a sudden I come across this story that says he was turned into a boar because of his, the way he worshipped God and stuff like that. I'm like, right, now we're talking, okay,
That's hilarious. That's funny.
I suppose, I guess you would probably agree that the concept of a hero, I guess, is fundamentally flawed. There's no one really that is completely perfect. There's no, even people when they say Mother Teresa and all that and Gandhi and all that, they were still human at the end of the day. Is there anyone that you think is kind of above that or that you've come across?
I don't think looking for perfection is the way you define a hero. There is no perfection. But I think is doing something great that involves sometime a degree of, it doesn't have to be a martyr story, but a little bit of a degree of doing something for greater than yourself, whether for other people or for something, despite all your flaws, your humanity, your bad moods, all of that. To me, that's heroic. And that to me is a very real level of heroism. Like to me, a heroic is, without even going that big scale, to me a parent that's working like a dog and then still is there for their kids at every step of the way and is like gets waken up by their kid in the middle of the night and they just want to choke them because they haven't had sleeping, then they still manage to be nice to them and kind, and that to me is heroic to the 10th degree. It's like, so hero doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it's just that ability to do something with tremendous heart, with great power, with overcoming all your own worst impulses. Heroic is when you're fighting against something that's trying to bring you down. It's trying to bring you to do something that's less than the way you would want to live, and you still find a way to turn it around and make it work.
Like those kind of everyday heroes in a way, right? Someone who just, they don't need to be Trajan conquering holding the Roman Empire together, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's where the hero story, where they are powerful. That sometimes seeing it on a large scale, seeing somebody that does something dramatic on a historical level serves as inspiration for those day-to-day hero moments in your daily life, which ultimately are the ones that really counts, are the ones that are going to make your kids grow well, are the ones that are going to have an impact on the people around you. It's not about what, because how many people get a chance to do something heroic on that scale, on the big historical scale? Not very much. But that doesn't mean you cannot have a tremendous impact on the people you live around.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think that's something that, especially historical figures, that I take a lot of inspiration from if I'm having a bad day or if I'm, going for that last rep at the gym or something like that, you think, oh, push through it kind of thing. But
Yep.
From an Italian perspective, though, obviously you were born in Milan, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So there's obviously, Italy's arguably got more history than anywhere in the world. Is there any particular Roman empires, Roman figures that inspire you in antiquity?
Roman guys. The Spartacus story is pretty badass. That's actually how I opened History on Fire. I did the Slave Wars. That was the very beginning. The first 2 episodes are on that. Roman culture was kind of messed up in a lot of ways. When you look at their history, it's not the healthiest culture ever. It's like very efficient at conquering people, but man, those are some mean bastards a lot of the time. Like everything is about violence and conquest and domination and force.
Glory, right?
Even like I did an episode at one point about sex in ancient Rome, and it was way more disturbing than I was hoping it would be. So much of, at least, it may not have been really the way people approach it in day-to-day life, but at least the elite discussion about sexuality there was such a rapey vibe to it, where everything was about domination, where it's like, Jesus, man, relax a little. There's something like inside. So there's as fascinating as it is, and there's a lot of fascinating stuff about Roman history, there's a mountain of crap there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's always been a fascination with me, but I also certainly wouldn't have wanted to live through it, either as a man or a woman, right? But I just returned. I'm based in London, but I just returned from North Wales, and they've got this island called Anglesey. And famously, this was where it was almost like the last hold of like Celtic Druidism when Romans pushed all the way in there. So there was a lot of history there that I found really interesting. And I didn't know that Druids were so heavily persecuted. I guess I should figure everyone was, right, under Roman rule.
Yeah, no, Romans were... On the other hand, despite the fact that, there's a weird history there, the HBO's TV series Rome, that I thought was one of the greatest TV series ever made. It's written so well, it's done, it's just fantastic. So it's if people haven't watched it, I strongly, strongly recommend it.
Yeah, I like that one too a lot, actually. I thought it was really... Well, from what I know about Rome, I thought it was really historically accurate. A lot more than the new... I don't know if you've seen the new Netflix one. I think it's called Roman Empire. And they kind of pick different... Yeah, it's a bit... It didn't really do it for me. They pick different emperors that are kind of interesting. I think they do, the Nero and then someone else. And then they do Constantine the 11th, who was the very, very last one. And he's my favorite. So, I didn't really quite cut it for me. You've got a dog there, do you, by the way? I've got to ask.
Yeah.
Is it a cat or a dog?
I don't know if he's a dog. It's probably a rabbit or something. He's like 9 pounds. He's tiny and fluffy.
Oh, very cute. Very cute.
I don't know that he counts as a dog. I think it's like a mutated rabbit.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah, probably.
I've got into philosophy probably in the last 2 or 3 years or so, actually. And Meditations is one kind of book that I keep on my bedside, right? Did you take much from that in terms of philosophy? What did you think of that?
Man, that was one of the rare cases where I start a series and I'm thinking, this is going to be somebody I really get into. And I think the series come out well, but I'm not nearly as into the character when I finish compared to when I started. Like so much of what I found about Marcus Aurelius, he was so damn cynical half of the time, where there's such a killjoy vibe to his philosophy, where while I appreciate stoicism in the sense of being able to have a certain degree of toughness and determination and be able to carry on regardless of all the crazy emotions that you may be feeling. That's all fantastic stuff. But the way Marcus approached it was so just duty for the sake of duty. All is vanity anyway. There's no point to anything. There's no point to happiness. You just should do your duty because you're supposed to. That I'm like, yeah, how about we don't? It just didn't sounded way too like what's the point kind of feeling. And it doesn't really give a very good answer for what's the point. It's more the carry on because you are born in that role and you should perform your role well. But other than that, don't. And I'm just like, look, I really appreciate Stoicism in terms of what it can help for one's, in the way it can help for one's life. But I also feel that it shouldn't come at the price of just being such a killjoy in terms of just looking at the good things in life.
I took a bit from it as well, noticing the beauty of nature and stuff. I thought that was where he kind of, if he was going to draw inspiration from anywhere, it kind of seemed to be seeing the, the bees performing their role and everything like that and stuff like that. But yeah, I see what you mean. I think probably because if he had his time over, he probably wouldn't have wanted to be an emperor. And then that comes down. And then that turns into, well, you probably didn't want to be a peasant, but here you are now. So, get cracking on the fields, right?
Absolutely. I just think that there's a line there between, having strong willpower, having strong discipline, which I think are value, but at the same time also laughing, cracking jokes, enjoying life, being playful. And I think Marcus Aurelius is a pro at the first half of that and is severely lacking in the second half.
You had to recommend a kind of beginner's book on philosophy that particularly inspired you. Obviously, I mean, I've read a bit of the Tao Te Ching, which I know is a big favorite of yours, and maybe I'm just don't have the brain to really get it. But is that something you'd kind of start people on?
Tao Te Ching is tricky because on one hand I love it, but I also read it in like a zillion different translations, and each translation is very different. Some translations are just, I mean, all translations are still a little tricky because they don't exactly explain with too much. They don't really explain much. You either get it or you don't, kind of thing. So in some translations, I read them and I was like, well, this is crap. This doesn't sound good, and I get nothing from it. Other translations spoke to me a lot more. That's actually one of the reasons why I did at one point, because I'm so big into Taoism as a philosophy. But then there was no single book that I can point to and say, read this and it captures what I mean. Because I mean, the closest would be there are some great books by Alan Watts, but even those were a little tricky in the sense that he speaks a very philosophical language that turned off some people. So what I ended up doing eventually, I ended up doing a lecture series on Taoism where I put together like some 7 hours of material of like kind of distilling what to me the key things are, but putting them in a language that's a little more user-friendly. So that's kind of been my answer to the fact that I could not find a single source where I could turn people and say, check this one out, and this captures it all. More recently, if people, because the lecture series is for sale, but if people want to check out a freebie, I did recently a podcast with Aubrey Marcus for his podcast that was all about Taoism. So we did like an hour and a half, 2 hour, probably more actually, it's 2 hour plus chat on Taoism. So that kind of gives you a vibe if some of these things resonate with you or not.
Sure. I'll have to check it out. What was the name of that podcast?
It used to be Warrior Poet. I think now it's Aubrey Marcus Podcast.
Okay.
I believe that's what it's called now.
I kind of came across that too. There was a lot about nature and a lot about very conceptual things that kind of went a bit over my head, but hey, maybe that's just me, right?
No, I mean, I honestly think the way it's written, you're looking at ancient Chinese from 2,500 years ago. It's hard. It's hard to convey it in a way that clicks. But the themes, that's the beautiful thing, is that once you get them, something goes on and it's like you see it everywhere, and not just like in daily life. It's like you see it very obviously as a principle it applies to life. I remember when I was a kid, I started reading this book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones that contain about 101 Zen stories. And the first time I read it, I think two made sense, where I was like, these are brilliant story. The other 99, I don't know what the hell it's talking about. And then like the next time I read, maybe it was 5, and the next time was 10. And I think by now I'm probably around 30 or so, but it's still, most of them still there's something that doesn't quite click. But once in a while, life experience or things happen, you go back and you're like, oh, I get it now. That makes perfect sense to me now.
Right, falls into place a bit, right?
Yeah.
And this was a kid's book, was it? It sounds very difficult to get as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, but I was a freak, so yeah.
Okay. Fair enough too.
Which is probably why also I understood 2 out of 101.
So what about in terms of, obviously the stuff you cover is kind of all over the place. You've got some Bruce Lee, Crazy Horse,
Sure.
No real trend between those two. Is there any kind of rhyme or reason that moves you onto something? Is it someone you find just interesting, or is it someone inspiring? Or
I think it's passion. Like I need stories that are epic in nature, that do something for me that I feel like, wow, this is somebody I want to spend that many hours reading about, or an event that I want to read that many hours reading about. Because there's something there that is powerful, that is fascinating, that is inspiring. And that's really the common thread. Is other than that, time, place, culture, doesn't matter. I'll go all over the place to chase those stories that are powerful.
Yeah, I think that's something I've always enjoyed as well. There's kind of I get it's a cliche once again, but like epic moments of history, right? Where there's been someone who, especially last stands, I've always been drawn to kind of those last stands where someone goes, no, I'm willing to die for this,
Yep.
for whatever reason. And some of them, so many you've probably forgotten, but someone where they're just, they against the tide of history, right? And they kind of say no, like Saigo Takamori, right? From, the Edo period, right? He's one that strikes to me.
Definitely. No, I think that's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. I need to be inspired. If you're not inspired, what the hell are we doing it for?
On that note, have you started any topics where you've kind of dropped them and thought, no, this is not working out. It's nothing here?
I usually figure it out earlier, where it's you start, it looks good, then you start doing the initial research at the very, very beginning, and you're like, oh, that does not look nearly as good, or it looks great, but there are no sources, so I don't have enough to talk about. Or, occasionally there's like the Marcus Aurelius thing where I start way more, or I did another one on Diogenes, the cynic philosopher, where at the end I think still the episode is a blast to do and is fun, despite the fact that I'm less than enthusiastic about the character I'm covering by the end, because I find some things brilliant, but others not so much. And I think that's okay too. That actually can enrich the dialogue sometime when you go with, this is great, however, there's a big downfall to this great idea, and this is where it's at. I think that's fine. That doesn't make it less epic. That is fine. It's problematic where the story just, there's not enough to support that initial enthusiasm, or you realize that it's a lot darker and uglier than you thought it was.
For anyone listening, kind of give a 30-second overview, because this guy was a pretty miserable bastard, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I called it, the episode was titled The Punk Rocker of Ancient Greece, because he has this very anti-authoritarian vibe. He's fairly hilarious, the way he goes against powerful figures, the way the trend of the times is hilarious, is funny, and there's something very enjoyable about this kind of iconoclastic vibe. However, that's all he's got. And sometimes I feel like I'm a big fan of destroying established precedent if you're going to create something better in the wake of it. If you're just destroying them and then that's where you stop, I'm like, okay, that's cool for laughs. It's sort of the opposite of Marcus Aurelius. Like, it's cool for laughs. That was a funny joke that you made at the expense of that super self-important person. However, what do you put forward in place of that? What do you have there that replaces it, that makes it, show me that you can not just destroy but create something great. And I think that was the part that was severely lacking, which when you think about it is a lot about punk culture too. So much of punk is great in the way it goes against something, but it does not do such a great job in terms of creating an alternative.
Yeah, well, Sid Vicious or Johnny Rotten, they're the ones that spring to mind when you think, right? At least
Yeah,
for
where
me.
you're like, okay, yeah, the stuffy old thing that you went against, you had a point, but what are you bringing that's better than that?
Mm. What's next for you then in terms of you mentioned you've got with any luck a book fairly on the horizon or something like that, and
Yeah,
obviously you're on Luminary now.
yeah, that's what I want to do. So the book is definitely a priority. It's tricky because History on Fire takes so much time that it's hard to have
Mm.
time to write. So who knows when? I'm trying, but it's complicated. Um, Podcasts, whatever I got coming up. I'm gonna do. I'm doing a bunch. I think the next one that comes out pretty soon. In the next, I think next month. I'm gonna do a couple of the Sacred Band in Thebes, which was this elite
Yeah.
infantry unit of 150 either homosexual or bisexual guys who are all. There were 150 couples of lovers who were stationed to be. That's a trippy story in itself. So I'm gonna do that one. I'm gonna do one that's exciting. That's coming up probably toward the end of the year about one siege by the Assyrians at Jerusalem, where
Okay.
had that siege gone differently, and by differently I mean the way everybody expected, because the Assyrians had
Mm.
destroyed everybody they went against. Had they decided to go through with the siege, probably there would be no Judaism, Christianity, or Islam today. So
Wow.
that's a bit of a trip because you think how sometimes history can turn on one event, and that
Mm.
one event being different, everything else we know about human history would be different. Well, the short version, and then I build a whole episode around it, which I think is enjoyable, but the short version is this, is the Assyrians said, back then the Hebrew tribes were split into different states, and the Assyrians had gotten after the first of the states, the bigger one actually, and completely wiped it off the face of the earth. Like
Okay.
that's why you get the story of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, because they
Mm.
spread them throughout the Assyrian Empire. They lose their specific religion, ethnicity, and you'd never really heard from them again. So now you only have these two other Jewish tribes left, and the Assyrians 20 years later go after them, and they basically destroy their entire country. The only thing that's left is Jerusalem. They are about to take it. If they do take it, it's going to end up exactly the way it ended up for the other 10. So you're going to have no Judaism, which of course without Judaism you're not going to have Christianity, and
Mm.
without those two you're not going to have Islam.
Mm.
So and then there's a twist where it doesn't work out that way, and then from there on Jewish culture will evolve in a way that even when they are conquered, they are not going to lose their traditions. So it's pretty trippy.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to that one for sure. Actually, it
Yeah.
kind of reminds me a bit of I don't remember the gentleman's name. One of the first converts to Islam. It was originally against Muhammad, and he
Mhm.
became one of his greatest generals. Absolutely wiped the Byzantines off the face of the earth. Right? It's
Right.
one of those where if that hadn't have happened, maybe you got some joker bureaucrat instead.
Yeah,
World might be a very different place.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks again, Daniele. Great talking to you.
Have a great one. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.